I'm Bridget Yaden. I'm the mentor for Holy Rosary Juan Diego Academy in Tacoma, Washington. I think I've been the mentor now for going on 5 years. This might be my 5th year. My son is in the program, which has made it through into 5th grade this year. So he's been in the program since kindergarten. It's been fun to watch him progress along with the program. We're going to take it all the way through 8th grade. And I'm also a Spanish professor at Pacific Lutheran University. So I'm glad you're all here today to talk about a fun topic, assessment.
Thank you, Bridget. It is a fun topic, a big part of all of our lives. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, which has Bridget's PowerPoint. And I do have a short prayer that I'll just lead us through very quickly. My goodness, it's been such a strange day. Okay, so there we go. All right, so we've got Bridget's introduction. We're going to skip through introductions more formally, and let's start with our prayer. So if you'll join me for just a moment, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. This comes to us from the United States Conference of Bishops, and I just went past it. All right, so here we go. Let us praise the Lord of days and seasons and years, saying, glory to God in the highest. And if you'll join me, and peace to his people on earth. Our lives are made up of days and nights, of seasons and years, and we are part of a universe of suns and moons and planets. We mark ends and we make beginnings, and in all, we praise God for the grace and mercy that fill our days. I have a reading for you from the book of Genesis. God said, let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate day from night. Let them mark the fixed times, the days and the years, and serve as luminaries in the dome of the sky to shed light upon the earth. And so it happened. God made 2 great lights, the greater one to govern the day, the lesser one to govern the night, and he made the stars. God set them in the dome of the sky to shed light upon the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. God saw how good it was. Evening came, and morning followed, the 4th day. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Thank you. So, Bridget, I'm going to let you take it from here.
All right, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. So here are the objectives for today's time together. I hope by the end of our session, you'll be able to define proficiency and identify the major proficiency levels. You'll be able to identify 2 assessment tools for assessing Spanish, but I would also add these tools that I'll be describing also are available for Mandarin, if we have any Mandarin programs on today or listening to this later, as well as English. So we have 2 tools I'll talk about specifically that we've used, and then describe at least 3 ways in which we can support our students towards proficiency goals. The 2 assessment tools that I'll be, not yet, hang on a second, 2 assessment tools. A question came in that Mary sent me about formative assessments. I might touch on that a little bit at the end, but I'll say now that the 2 assessment tools we'll look at today are more for summative assessments for language proficiency. I'm happy to answer any questions you have as we go along, so please feel free to interrupt. And I'm also happy to answer questions in English or in Spanish. So feel free to ask me questions in either language. Is that all right, Mary? All right, you can go to the next slide, please. Mary is my Vanna for today, she said. She promised to be my Vanna. So of course, assessment, I always make a joke in my own department meetings that we like to leave assessment for our last agenda item so that we never get to talking about it. It's sometimes the dreaded A word. But when we have assessment, we can really leverage the results for good, right? That doesn't always have to be painful. So I like to think about our assessment results as things that can help us plan for instruction as teachers. We want to think about how we message the results to our stakeholders, our parents. They want to know how their kids are doing. How do we use the results to show student growth? And then also, how do we help students set their own goals to get to the proficiency levels? So these are all things we'll try to answer as we go through the samples here. Mary, if you could go to the next slide. All right, so as I said in one of the objectives, I hope by the end of our time together, you will all have a working definition of language proficiency. And this is a modified presentation that I actually did for the teachers at Holy Rosary as a professional development half day. And I think it's really important to start off with a shared definition of what is language proficiency. So these are just a few things I've pulled off the ACTFL website. Proficiency is functional language ability, what someone can do in the language. And this is really important, that it's unrehearsed. It's not memorized. It's not practiced speech. It's unrehearsed, the kind of conversation we have when we call up a friend and talk about what we did over the weekend, right? And proficiency is not achievement, and proficiency assessments are not achievement tests. I like to start with this definition with teachers, but also with parents. We work really hard to message this to parents. You'll see this in a sample letter I'll share with you in a little bit that we give to parents, so they know what it is we're trying to do with proficiency when we talk about proficiency goals. Are there any questions right now with this definition of proficiency or with the goals for this session before I move on? Okay, Mary, we'll go on. Feel free, if you come up with a question, just shout it out. I don't have my chat window open, so just talk into your microphone. I think most of you are familiar with the ACTFL proficiency scales. This, as a college Spanish professor, I deal with this scale a lot. And it's the famous inverted pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid are lower proficiency levels. And then as we go up the three-dimensional pyramid, we can see that proficiency, as it goes higher, gets really deep as well, right? So the levels are novice, intermediate, advanced, superior, and a few years ago they added distinguished. In most of our programs, whether K through 5 or K through 8, we're going to be dealing mainly in novice and intermediate and possibly into advanced. I doubt we'll ever be assessing our students at superior or distinguished levels. So those of you that are certificated teachers, if you have your endorsement in Spanish or in Mandarin or whatever language, depending on the state you're in, you may have had to take this assessment test. Has anyone on this call taken a proficiency test?
No.
No?
Yes. Yes, this is Mariela. When I was getting my bilingual certificate in Texas, I needed to take the Texas Oral Proficiency Test and score at an advanced level.
Great, yep. Thank you for sharing. In Washington State, to be a bilingual teacher, you need to get advanced mid. To be a second language teacher, like a high school Spanish teacher or Mandarin teacher, you need to get advanced low. And you can see in the categories, you probably can't see my mouse moving, but in the novice level, there are 3 ranges, and in the intermediate level, there are 3 ranges, and also in the advanced. So we talk about novice, low, mid, high. I'm not an expert or an official proficiency tester on this ACTFL scale, but if you go to the ACTFL website, you can see different descriptors for what it means, what a student can do, what a speaker can do, what a writer can do at each of these various levels. Any questions on the ACTFL scale here or comments? Then we'll move on. So the next slide, Mary, thanks. So the 2 tools that we have used, again, these are more summative tools for a couple of reasons. They're summative. They take some time to administer. They cost money, so they wouldn't be things that you'd use, in my opinion, for formative assessments, but rather summative assessments. Today I'm going to talk about the STAMP assessment from Avant Assessment and focus more actually on the second one, the Apple assessment, which is from ACTFL, their testing company, which is LTI, Language Testing International. I've used both in my own professional world. At Holy Rosary, we went with Apple, and I'll tell you why in a minute, why we chose Apple over STAMP, but they're both very similar assessments. They're both computer-based, so they're really easy to administer to lots of students at the same time, knock on wood if your network is working. Those of you that have used the Woodcock Munoz or other types of assessments that are one-on-one, you know that takes a lot more manpower to do the assessments. But here you can, as many computers as you can get on the network, you can test all of those students at the same time. Both of the assessments use the ACTFL scale, so they'll test listening, speaking, reading, and writing at novice mid or novice high, intermediate low, etc. And the costs are similar. We have a bulk account with both of these testing companies, and they both run us about $20. So for Apple, for example, when we do listening, speaking, reading, and writing, all 4 skill areas, for a total of $20 per student. And STAMP is about the same. The main difference is, and this is one main reason why we actually went with Apple over STAMP, is that Apple has even more specific sub-levels of proficiency. So if you remember from the ACTFL inverted pyramid, novice has low, mid, high, 3 sub-levels. Intermediate has low, mid, high, 3 sub-levels. As we go up the scale, we know that it's slower. It takes us longer to get higher proficiency levels because, again, remember that pyramid is 3-dimensional. As proficiency goes up, the amount of language that the student has is exponentially more. And so it's slower. And to show parents or students that they're, let's say, at novice mid at the end of 1 grade, and then after a whole another year of being in our wonderful program, they're still at novice mid, but they're a really good novice mid. Like we have a sense as the teacher that they're a better novice mid than they were last year. But if the test isn't more fine-tuned than that, we can't really show it. So the Apple assessment has like 5 levels, I believe, at the novice level instead of low, mid, high. It has N1, N2, N3, N4, N5, I believe. And then the intermediate level has more specific sub-levels. So someone could be novice mid, but they can be an N2 1 year, and then an N3 the next year. Because our students do grow, they may not grow enough in a year to move a whole subcategory on the ACTFL scale, but the Apple scale is a little more fine-tuned and it will show growth more quickly than the STAMP, which is basically the ACTFL scale. So we found that it was, it's better to be able to demonstrate growth to parents and not just say, well, they're still at the same level they were last year, but they're better somehow. Any questions on this overview of the 2 assessments? I'll get into the specifics in a second, but, or anyone who've used either one and want to add to what they know.
Hi, Bridget. This is Carrie Fuller. Can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Carrie.
Okay, hi. I'm not, I know you said you can, and maybe you're going to get into the logistics of giving this test, but from your, I don't know if you're going to get into that later, I can wait, but my question is basically, when you gave the presentation in the spring, you also said that, or in the summer academy, that you could give multiple students the assessment at the same time. And we found when we tried to do that, like we really had to sit with each student to kind of prompt them on how to take the Apple. Did you find that the first time you had to do that? And then after that, they could take it, multiple kids at the same time?
We definitely had several parents in the room to help the younger kids with the login. I think the login was the most complicated. We had a piece of paper for each student ready with their name and their login. And yes, we could stand in front of the room and say, everybody watch me, go to this screen, enter your username and password. Some of the kids were taking, like the first graders, second graders, were taking too much time. So we just went around and logged them in. And once we logged them in, it was really easy. That was the most complicated part, was logging them in.
Okay, and they weren't distracted by hearing other people talking?
No, we spread them out pretty well, and they all had headsets with the microphone, which helped drown out the background noise as well. Yeah, so we had, I think in the largest we had, because of our network, we were more worried about our network. We were in a portable. We had about 25 students testing at one time, all speaking and listening. It was really fun. We took some videos of just this kind of noise happening.
Oh, wow. Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Although it's a great question, Carrie. One thing I would have done differently, but now that we've done it, we don't need to, is I would have had all of the students do the demo test We just ran out of time, and that might have sped up that process as well.
I don't even know if I saw that there's a demo test right when you log in.
You don't even need a login to do the demo test. You all can go on and take a demo speaking, listening, reading, or writing test for either of these testing companies without a code. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
And my goal was to go into each classroom and actually project the demo test and go through it as a group with them, but we just ran out of time and wanted to get to the results.
So that's a great idea, over the whole class demo.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks.
Great question. All right, Mary, if you'd like to go to the next one, this might start generating some more questions or maybe some answers. This is just a screenshot for the Avant. It's a testing company that's out of Oregon, which is nice. It's local for us. It started at the University of Oregon as a nonprofit and then became a for-profit company. The stamp 4SE is important. E is for elementary age grades 2 through 6. This is also the test that our state uses for middle school and high school students to get credit on their transcript for language proficiency. So there's an elementary school version that you would want to get, the SE. The next slide, I think, just has a screenshot of what the Apple website looks like. It's a little confusing. It's ACTFL's test, but their testing company is LTI, Language Testing International. So either one of those, Avant Assessment for the stamp test, LTI for the Apple assessment, you can go to their website and do the demo test without registering for free. You can have parents, students, teachers try it out. And then that's where you would contact the testing company to actually set up an account to order your tests when you're ready to test. All right, next slide. Let's get into the specifics now. So what we did as a program, again, our program is all the way into 5th grade. We have pre-K, 3-4, full immersion. Kindergarten is a 90-10. And then 1st grade through now 5th grade is 50-50. Next year we'll be excitedly moving into a middle school model that we're still building. We're building the plane as we're flying it. But with all of our programming, we try to think in terms of backward design. So where do we want our students to be at the end of 8th grade, let's say at the end of our program? Keeping in mind that literacy goals might be different from speaking goals. Students might be more proficient in speaking or more proficient in literacy, depending on individual differences as well as program differences. But I'm going to show you on this next slide, these are our current goals based on Utah's model. Utah, the state of Utah, many of you know, has wonderful dual immersion programs. I was at a session a few years ago at ACTFL when they were presenting their assessment goals and results, and I thought, why reinvent the wheel? Start with theirs. And I say this is where we're starting. Now that we're actually assessing our students, we may revise this. We may revise it down, we may revise it up, we may actually have to do both. So I know there's a lot going on the screen, but to show you that from 1st through 8th grade, we have different proficiency goals exiting that grade year for listening, speaking, reading, and writing. For 1st grade, all novice mid, but you can see as the grades progress, we're assuming, based on the Utah model, but this may not end up being true for us, that listening and speaking proficiency might progress a little more quickly than the reading and writing. I have a suspicion that it might not, but anyway, here are our goals as we have them. And feel free to copy this, test it out with your own students. But again, I got these from Utah. But now what we're doing, if you go to the next slide, Mary, is we're actually assessing our students. And here's where we are. We had done one full set of tests last spring. We did listening and speaking with the Apple assessment. And we assessed, this was last year, so we had 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders. We didn't have 5th graders yet until this year. A reminder that our speaking goal for 1st graders was novice mid. 76% of our students were at or above that proficiency level. Our 2nd graders, 92% were at or above novice high in speaking. We were very excited about that. Our 3rd graders were, and again, you can see novice high was the goal for 2nd and 3rd grade. But for Apple, we actually have a more fine-tuned level, there's N2, N3, and N4. So we can look at specifically at the more intricate differences there. But 72% of our students were at or are above. And the fourth graders last year, this is my son's group, it's the Pioneer group. These are our little test tube babies, our lab mice is maybe a better analogy, right? We've been testing on the Pioneer group. 50%, we were very happy, were at or higher. 50% were below intermediate low. Couple things going on there. Intermediate is a big jump from novice, for one, in terms of what students can do with their language. But we've been tweaking the model as we've been learning with our students. And so our fourth graders last year were kids who came through the old model where kindergarten was 50-50. And then we realized we had a sense from our Woodcock-Munoz data that we'd been doing with Boston College that they weren't progressing as quickly in Spanish as we would have liked. So we changed our model after our Pioneer group finished kindergarten, right? So the third, second, and first graders you see on this chart are with the new model of pre-K 3-4, full immersion, kindergarten 90-10. So we beefed up the amount of language they're getting in kindergarten, Spanish language, and we saw the results right away. So our poor little Pioneers are always going to be a little bit lower, I think, than the other grades. Any questions or comments on this first set of results that we got from speaking?
Can you hear me? This is Maureen Ragone.
I can, Maureen.
Okay. Question. We're extending to the 5th grade, and the bishop wants us to go all the way 8th grade to Mandarin. So we're also experimenting a lot. What is your projection for your instructional percentages 5 through 8 or 6 through 8? Will it be 50-50, or will you be reducing that to make it more a language enhanced program?
Our goal still is 50-50.
And are you extending the school day for that?
No, we don't plan to extend the middle. Our kids are in school from 8 to 3, which I don't know how that compares.
Hours. Yeah.
But we're trying to figure it out this year, so we'll be ready for next year. I'd be happy to share drafts once we get working on that this spring.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we're planning to go 50-50. Keep it 50-50, but of course do what subject matters. Now that's going to be the question, because it'll be more like a middle school model. We'll go to one teacher for math, one teacher for, whatever subject matter.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
So,
thank you.
Sure. Mary, if you could go to the next slide then. So that was our first set of testing results with the speaking. And of course, when our kids went home and told their parents, hey, we did this test at school, the parents have been asking us, how are my kids doing in Spanish? They really wanted to know. So what we did was we developed a letter for parents that explained the kind of test their child took, defined proficiency. Again, as I said earlier, we're always trying to let them know what proficiency is, so what it is that we're testing, not something that they can necessarily study for before they take a test. They can surely practice, but not necessarily study. And in the letter, we gave their individual students' test results as well as the class results. We took a bit of a risk because some of our students who were not meeting the goal, the parents could see what percentage of kids were higher than their own. And the other thing that I thought was neat, and this is provided with the Apple assessment, they give you a nice chart that shows you, let's say you're at an N2, novice mid, lower novice mid, what you can do in simple language. Your child can do this in Spanish. And then what your child can do to move to the next level. It gives some pointers and ideas for how they can progress to the next level. This is helpful for students to know, for setting their own goals, for parents to know and supporting them, but also for teachers to know, how do we get our students to the next level? So the next two slides have a screenshot of a sample letter. If you could go to the next slide, Mary. So this is one student. Again, this was back in June. It was really easy to make these form letters. We had put our logo on there. All the results come to us in Excel. So it's pretty easy to maneuver the results and bulk form letters home to the parents. So this showed for this student, for example, we said this assessment tests proficiency or ability to use language. So we put in that definition of proficiency. We tell them what's in this letter, and then we show them. So this student got a score of N4, which is novice high, and then a description that comes from the testing company. This means that you can be part of a conversation about yourself and your life, etc. And then the next paragraph shows suggestions for how to move to the next level. No, that's okay, Mary. Go ahead to the next one. And then the second part of the letter, then, this is the risky part, as I mentioned, we actually showed the chart for all of the second graders. So this student, this parent, knows that the student tested at N4, but can also look here and see that all the students that were, and you might find this interesting as well on the call, that look at all these students that were already into the intermediate levels. Intermediate mid, we had up to second graders who were speaking at intermediate mid I4 level. So that was a letter we sent home to parents, and at the bottom of the letter, which I don't think is on the screenshot, it had who to call if you had questions, and my name was on there. I put my name on as mentor, and believe me, I got some calls within about an hour of kids going home. What does this mean? What can I do for my kid? But got a few calls, but I think most of the parents understood what the letters were trying to say. Questions on the letter that we sent to parents? All right, if you could go to the next slide, Mary. So our plan for this year, we plan to continue tweaking both our assessment goals based on the results, but also assessing our students in all of this areas. Last year, we just did speaking and listening. It was the thing we were most interested in. We felt with the other kinds of assessments we use, the MAPS testing, for example, and DIBELS testing, other kinds of language arts testing that different teachers were using, we had a sense of how students, a better sense of how students were doing with reading and writing, not so much with speaking and proficiency for sure. So we started with speaking intentionally last year to test out the whole process. This year, this month, actually, we'll be assessing reading and writing using the Apple assessment with 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. And then in the spring, just like we did last year, late May, early June, we're going to do that same speaking and listening test 1st through 5th grade. So we'll have some data that we can compare, and I'll be happy to share that with the network for those of you that are interested. Mary, if you can go on to the next slide.
I have a quick question. Will this be the first time you're doing the reading? Is that what you said?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
And you're still doing DIBELS or other assessments that you'll be comparing, or do you do Fontes and Pinnell?
Well, we won't be able to, it'll be hard to compare because they're so different, right? The proficiency scale, this is the only time we'll have assessed reading and writing using proficiency scales. So, but we'll be able to compare the speaking for sure compared to last year. And then next winter when we do reading and writing a second time, we'll have some data to compare.
Great. I look forward to hearing about how that goes, or what that offers.
Yep.
Speaking.
We're happy to share it because, like I said, the more data we get, the more likely it is we're going to completely revise or maybe just tweak that assessment, our goals, our proficiency goals. You know, getting our students to a certain level by 8th grade, we might find is too ambitious or maybe not ambitious enough. So, yeah. So just this last slide here, before we jump into some questions, it was something that I used this presentation with the teachers. How can we help our students towards proficiency? This test, I think, got the teachers thinking more about what is proficiency. We were noticing just informally with our students on the playground or, you know, in between lessons, they're often jumping to English. We weren't necessarily hearing students just having that unrehearsed conversation in Spanish about, hey, what'd you do last weekend? Or what are you going to do tonight after school, right? Or what'd you bring for lunch? And so I think this has encouraged teachers in class to think about proficiency and help their students move up the proficiency ladder. So these are the ideas that came out of the workshop I did with the teachers. Lots of pair conversation opportunities, quick, 30-second turn and talk to your elbow partner, or inner outer circles where every 30 seconds students are, the circle's moving and they're just talking to their friend about tell me one thing you did last night, or tell me one thing you're going to do tonight, or what's your favorite whatever, right? This kind of unrehearsed, unpracticed speech. Speed dating, depending on the age group. It's what I call it for my college students. We do lots of speed dating or micro conversations. They don't have to be long. We've all found as teachers that if we give our students 15 minutes to do something, to have a conversation that they're only prepared to talk 30 seconds about, after 30 seconds, they're going to get off task or switch to English. So just those short conversations, that can really help with speaking proficiency. But again, writing and reading, in terms of proficiency, that's unrehearsed, unpracticed. It's not the write a composition, revise, check your grammar, look at it 2 days later and revise. It's just free writing, right? You can get sample prompts from the demo tests for both STAMP and Apple, and just have students pull out a piece of paper and for 5 minutes, just write about whatever theme, and just keep writing for as long as you time them. And the same for reading. Just have them read for fun. Stephen Krashen's a big fan of voluntary reading, staying silent reading. Back when I was a kid in the 70s in elementary school, we did a lot of that. Just reading. And so helping students with their proficiency in reading, writing, and speaking are some things that we can do in class. And then the tests won't seem so strange to them, right? So I think the next slide, Mary, is when we have time for questions, comments, other ideas. I can talk a little bit about some ideas I thought of for formative assessment, but I wanted to see what your questions are first of all.
Oh, hi, this is Mariela, the mentor at St. Leo's in San Antonio. Hi.
Hi.
And so I had a question. How did you go about the funding for the Apple? You said it's about $20 per student. Did you all go to the Archdiocese to ask for funds? How did you fund it?
Yeah, we tried, but that didn't work. So $20, yeah, it's a good question. We have to put it into our budget, which is tight. I'm on the school board as well, so I know we're always working with a negative budget. Since we only did the speaking last year, it actually was only about, I think, $6. It's $20 total if you do all 4 skill areas, the listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So this year, definitely, it's going to end up being about $20 per student for all of the students 1st through 5th grade. It's a chunk of change, but we put it into our budget because it's so important to be able to message this to the parents. We've had, in the early years, we had some parents leave the school for lots of different reasons, but I think part of it was just kind of not having a sense that their students were making much progress in Spanish. So we think it's a good investment. But I do know that, I've seen other schools, other high schools, for example, that do this for credit with their students. They ask the PTA to help out, or they ask the parents to pay, but we've had to find a way to fit it into our budget.
Okay, and by your budget, you mean like the schools itself?
The school's
the
budget,
school,
yeah.
the principal's budget.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Yep. But again, if you want to, I would strongly encourage, like we did, just pick one skill area that you're most curious about, and you'll only need to pay for that one test, and it should only be around $6 per student. You might pick one grade, maybe the grade you're most curious about. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. I hope in the future the Arch will see the importance of helping us with this.
Larkin in Seattle, I agree with you on that last comment.
Yeah, Larkin, we got the same Arch, so they don't get it. Other questions? I know the one question that came in about formative assessments, I'd be happy to talk a little bit about that if you'd like.
This is Larkin again. I have a question about, heritage speakers of Spanish taking this exam. How have you seen parents responding, both, Spanish-speaking parents responding to their students taking an exam in Spanish? I mean, have you seen complications come up, or any parents questioning why you're, assessing their spoken Spanish language when they speak Spanish at home?
Yeah, I actually think that the parents were really just as curious as the English speaking parents to know how their kids did on the assessment, right?
Yeah, that's what
Um,
I think my parents would too. But that question came up when I was talking to our school commission about why we're intending to assess
yeah,
in Spanish speaking, but we're not going to be doing it in English speaking. So,
right, yeah. No, we didn't have any pushback. They were excited and curious to find out. And, one thing I would say is if you look at the different themes, topics that are assessed, a lot of times they're topics that the kids might not be talking about at home, right? We talk about heritage speakers having kind of kitchen language use. They can talk about what's going on in the kitchen at home, but there's a wider array of topics that are assessed on the test. So I think parents are curious to know how their kids could do in other themes and other topics.
great. Thank you. That's helpful.
And of course, they love seeing how, most of those kids were above the scale. So that's always good.
Yeah.
It made them feel good. Other questions? Or I could talk about formative really quick. One question that came in to Mary was about formative assessment. So the two tools here, since they're expensive and they take some time and the results are on the actual scale, I would consider these more as summative, kind of one slice of where the students are at a given point in the school year. But thinking of proficiency, assessing proficiency, because again, that's kind of my bent here, using formative assessments, I go to the actful, necessful, can-do statements. Those are my go-to even as a college first-year Spanish instructor. I'm starting my class tomorrow, Spanish 101, and I go to that document. Are you all familiar with that? The actful, necessful. Necessful is NCSSFL. Can-do targets. If you haven't seen it, it's a wonderful document. It's free online. You just Google it, and it shows descriptions of different proficiency levels for novice, intermediate, advanced speakers. And they become, for me as an instructor, they become my daily language objectives. They change based on the theme that I'm teaching, but again, I'm not a skilled actful assessor. So if you were to have me listen to someone and try to decide if they were novice mid or novice high or intermediate low, I don't know that I could do that very easily. I'm not at all trained. But knowing that as I teach Spanish 101, my students are novice low, novice mid, I go to this document and let's say I'm doing a speaking. So I pulled one up just before this to try to answer this question. Our first graders at Holy Rosary, we want them at novice mid speaking at the end of the school year. So this actful, necessful document, I look at what does a novice mid speaker look like and what can they do? And I pulled up one example. I can express basic needs related to familiar and everyday activities using a mix of practiced and memorized language. Practice and memorize is pretty typical of novice, right? They depend on a lot of that structured language that they've memorized.
Mhm.
And then let's say, okay, well, I'm teaching formative assessment. Today we were talking about sharing on the playground, right? So my objective is I can express, turn taking when it's my turn to play on the playground equipment. That's a familiar and everyday activity. And that could be my target for the day. I have a checklist of all my students. And as I hear students able to have that, to express that basic need, I just check them off my checklist. And that's how I do formative assessments in my own teaching. Whether you have a more formal system for then tracking that, something like Easy CBM, I know is something that some of the schools in the network have used where you can keep all those results. But you just kind of look at can-do targets for the proficiency levels that you have as goals for your students, and then you adapt them to whatever the theme is or the topic that you're working on. And it could be a self-assessment at the end of a lesson. It could just be a quick checklist as you as the teacher hear the student be able to do that. But that's a wonderful document if you haven't seen it for more practical, formative kinds of assessments. And setting learning targets is the actful, necessful, can-do targets.
I will send out a link to that, Bridget, so that we can have it as a reference.
Great.
Other questions about what we've covered, or thoughts that you have about your own schools or practices?
We do a can-do it's a formative assessment. We hand out an assessment card time for the Mandarin, but I think what we are lacking is setting the specific goals and performance levels for our students. I think we've been more plodding along and looking at the individual rather than setting maybe more rigorous and having higher expectations for them.
Yeah. I agree with you, and we were in the same boat. Like I said, it took us until our pioneers were in the 4th grade where we just kind of took a dive into the assessment pool and looked at Utah's examples and just said, let's start with theirs and assess our students and see where they are. But it took us 5 years to get there. I'm not a fan for reinventing the wheel. So if someone else is doing it, I say, try it and see if it works for us. I really encourage you and your teachers to look at the demo tests for both Avant and Apple. They're both easy tests to order. I've been on the administrative side. They're easy to, be billed and pay. They're easy to order codes. And the results are very easy to understand. And you can download them all and into Excel and move things around.
Any other thoughts or questions? There's a lot to take in, but I really like how you've presented this. It doesn't feel overwhelming, Bridget. This is bite-sized amounts, and putting it into a frame such as ACTFL's cone is really helpful, and also to bring in Utah's work. Utah has done some remarkable things in the last 5 to 10 years with dual language, and it's great to use. You're not reinventing. You're an innovator. You're adapting. So this is important for all of us to do, which is kind of the goal of the network, that we learn from each other.
Right. As
you are thinking about what we've covered here today, I just wanted to make sure, because some of you are not showing up, I just want to make sure that I know who's here. So we have Mrs. Ragone from New York. We have Larkin from Seattle. I heard Carrie. We have Mariela Rodriguez. Some folks are just not, is there someone else whose name I have not said? Okay. I hope I've caught, Yvette was with us for a little while.
I'm still here.
And she's still here. Excellent. Thank you for still being here. Yvette went to the dentist today, you guys. She is a trooper.
Yeah, that's why I'm not speaking.
Perfectly okay. It just is funny how it's showing up today. It's been a very strange, just one of those days. We're all supposed to just stay in bed here in New England where it's 2 degrees. But we are many of us thinking about assessments and plans for next year. So these are just 2 such assessments. There are many. I know several are looking at the Apple. Bridget, would you be comfortable if folks have questions afterwards to send you an email, or I can pass along messages to you?
I'd be happy to take emails, calls, whatever questions people have. I know there's been actually a couple mentors who I've had phone conversations with already. I know folks are interested in this, and I learn from you all as well with the questions that you ask. And please, yes.
Thank you very much. It's very generous of you, and your time is very generous. Bridget has been working on this and thinking about it for some time, so thank you for doing that. It's a benefit to the whole network. There's a lot to think about, a lot to digest. And as we close out here this afternoon, please give some thoughts to what kind of materials you might want to read about this spring. Is assessment something you want to spend more time thinking about as a community, to learn from each other? I am setting up individual calls between schools who are working on similar projects. If you're exploring this and you want to see what's happening in another school, let me know, and I will facilitate the conversation because we can have a Zoom conversation between two principals, just holding up your devices and say, here's what our testing room looks like. Here's what 25 children's computers look like. I worked at a school last year. We tested altogether like 960 children on computers. It was like a machine by the end. They had it down to a science, and which kids are going to have trouble and which won't. But it's a lot of work, whether it's 10 kids or 100 kids. So, but it can be done, and there are techniques and things we all learn, so it'd be great to share that information. I'm going to send out an email with the references that Bridget has mentioned so that you can look at Necessful, you can review Easy CBM. Many of you are using it, but maybe it's new for some others. There will be a link for feedback. If we think of other good resources, we'll send them to you as well in that email so that you can look at it for yourself. And if we are really interested in exploring assessment more deeply, we'll consider that for our book group. I am getting some suggestions for books, so if there's a book you're really interested to read as a group, let me know. And we'll be deciding that by the end of the month. But if there are no more questions or comments at this time, I'll just review one or two things, and then I will wish you all a good afternoon. Do look for this email that I mentioned. Please make sure that you are thinking about the Summer Academy. It is now 2018. The countdown has begun. My wonderful, fabulous colleague, Fabiola, who is traveling in her homeland of Chile right now, has already started planning. She's got many exciting activities ready to go for you all come summer. I think she's had it with winter. She's done. So she's already thinking about late June and all the fun things that she's going to do with us during that week. So,
Do you have the dates for the
yes.
Summer Academy?
June 24th through the 28th.
Okay.
And to whom am I speaking?
Maureen Ragone.
Thank you, Maureen. You sounded a little strange. I'm telling you, it's
I'm
been
strange.
a very
I'm
no.
frozen.
My
I'm frozen.
This is like my third computer of the day. I was not
Okay.
supposed to get out of bed today. It's just the universe keeps throwing things at me, so you sounded strange on my end. But that's the 24th through the 28th. We've been mentioning it quite a bit, so we just want to make sure everyone's got those dates. It's going to be at the Babson Executive Conference Center, which is just a couple towns over from us here in the Boston area. It's a great facility, and we think you'll really enjoy it. Okay, so look out for this email and enjoy your evening. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas and holiday season, and we are looking forward to the rest of this school year with you. Thank you, Bridget. Round of applause for Bridget. Thank you for your time, and I will talk to you all soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Mary. It was awesome.
Thank you, Bridget. See you later.
Bye. Stay warm.
Thank you.